Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. It's the fifth legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade, and coming up on tonight's program, House and Senate Democrats announced their support of the federal health care reform law. The law is currently being challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court by more than 20 states, including Georgia. Governor Nathan Deal's office responds to criticism from Tea Party patriots who want to repeal the transportation sales tax. The T-SPLOST is set to go on the ballot in Georgia this summer. The House gives final passage to legislation allowing the Department of Public Safety to dispose of surplus vehicles. Yosha Howard takes us through this week under the Gold Dome. It's been a busy one, especially for her first week. And I'll be joined on set by Buddy Darden and Bill Crane, two legislative experts for in-depth analysis of this week's issues. That'll be the topic. They'll put everything in perspective, so don't miss that. All those stories are coming up tonight on the program. But first, let's go live to the Capitol, where primetime lawmaker Sandra Parrish says House and Senate Democrats stood up for the Federal Health Care Reform Act today. Good evening, Sandra.
Good evening, Scott. Democratic lawmakers say they're joining in solidarity with 500 legislators around the country and supporting the constitutionality of the law that's being challenged by Georgia and more than 20 other states and will be heard before the U.S. Supreme Court.
The Affordable Care Act, passed by Congress, signed into law by the President, has given Georgians more freedom and more control over their health care choices. We've seen a difference here in Georgia in the time that the parts of this law have come online. And we are sending a strong message today by signing the amicus brief, the friend of the court brief, in support of the constitutionality.
Democrats are also calling on Republican leaders to move ahead with a statewide health insurance exchange, which would set up a marketplace from which customers could choose their own plan. States are mandated to do so by 2014.
I think we need to come together across party lines and do what's best for Georgians and prepare ourselves for the possibility that the law is upheld and held to be constitutional, and we don't want to be late to the game. There are federal grants, monies to continue this planning and this work, and so we think it's very important, strategically significant, and that the wise thing to do, the leadership of Georgia, is to move ahead with health care marketplace legislation.
Republicans put forward a bill last year to do so, but slammed on the brakes the day the bill was to be voted on.
The real problem with the exchange, and the reason that we had to slow down and sort of back off of that, was at the beginning of talking about an exchange, it appeared that states were going to have the flexibility to design an exchange the way they thought fit the needs of their state. As it went along, regulations started being written in which the flexibility of the states were basically taken away, and it was going to be a one-size-fits-all mandate that if you were going to have a state exchange, you had to fit the pattern that the federal government was dictating. When that happened, it appeared to me that it did not benefit us to travel down that road until we knew the fate of the constitutionality of the existing statute.
But Representative Pat Garner says she's prepared to draft a bill herself if Republicans won't.
We'll be at the back of the line in terms of applying for federal funds to help set up the exchange. So it has consequences. There are consequences.
And while the governor and Republican leaders tell me they're confident the court will overturn the law, they feel they would have enough time to create an exchange if it doesn't. A spokesman for Governor Nathan Deal is defending him today against charges by the Tea Party that he's breaking his promise not to support any tax increase by advocating for this summer's transportation sales tax. At its rally yesterday, the Tea Party called on the governor and Republican leaders to repeal the law that passed 2 years ago, creating the referendum.
How many came in this room to voice your opposition to T-SPLOST and are working in your counties?
The Tea Party has been an outspoken critic of the T-SPLOST, complaining that many of the projects in the metro Atlanta region would only benefit a small portion, namely MARTA. Its members are now critical of Governor Deal, who advocated for the vote during his State of the State address this week.
I applaud this legislature's creation of a transparent, bottom-up approach to identifying critical transportation projects throughout Georgia. The regional referendums on this year's ballots will give voters the opportunity to fund a slate of projects with a sales tax when they deem the proposed investment provides value. Over the last several decades, our capacity has fallen behind due to underinvestment in transportation. We must seize this opportunity to invest in our future. We can do this, and with your help, we will.
This is a pledge that was signed by Governor Nathan Deal. I, Governor Nathan Deal, pledge to the taxpayers of the state of Georgia that I will oppose and veto any and all efforts to increase taxes. If you speak and you ask for the taxpayers of this state to vote themselves a tax increase, how in the name of God can you sit there with a serious face and tell me that that's not supporting a tax increase? It said I will oppose.
This is the vehicle that the legislature and the previous governor chose to solve this problem. This is divided up into different regions. Each region gets to have its own say in whether this tax is worth the projects that come with it. Those projects were not drawn up by the governor. Those projects were not drawn up by the legislature. They were drawn up by the local communities. This is as much local choice as you can get. This is as much direct democracy, which the Tea Party supports, as you can get.
The Tea Party did deliver a letter to the governor expressing criticism of his support for the referendum, but as for repealing the law that created it, Governor spokesman Brian Robinson tells me that's not likely to happen. The State House gave final passage today to a bill that allows the Department of Public Safety to sell or trade old vehicles. HB 253 passed the state Senate yesterday. Under current law, the Public Safety Commissioner has to first offer the vehicles to the state's Public Safety Training Center. Representative Doug Collins explains why the change was needed.
It puts it on a newer age schedule. Instead of wearing out the cars, they'll be sold, in which they can actually bring back money. In both places, this is a safety issue for the state troopers and also a money savings for the state. If there are no questions, Mr. Speaker, I yield the will.
The bill passed unanimously and now goes to the governor's desk. Scott, even though the legislature is not officially in session next week, lawmakers begin delving into the mid-year and the 2013 budgets as hearings begin on Tuesday. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish for Primetime Lawmakers.
Been a busy week. Thanks for everything, Sandra. The Georgia General Assembly convenes every January for 40 legislative days. Those 40 session days usually take 3 or 4 months to complete. This week, we burned off 5 days. And our Keosha Howard now takes us back with a week in review.
The Senate jumped right into action this week, passing 2 bills Monday morning that affect how school boards are governed. Senate Bill 184 stirred up controversy, with Republicans saying the measure would give school boards the freedom to choose which teachers to lay off in tough budget times, but Democrats believe the measure is actually pay-for-performance legislation.
It's pay for performance. That's what this is. And they're passing it on the first day when we don't usually take on an intricate issue.
If this body on the first day, the last day, or any day in between can't look at this policy and realize how ridiculous it is, I don't know what we're going to do to fix education. Last in, first out takes nothing into consideration but how long you've been there.
The Senate also passed Senate Bill 38, which gives the school superintendent hiring and firing power and the power to approve contracts. Also on day one, we heard from Governor Nathan Deal on some of his budget priorities. Education, specifically pre-K, was at the top of the list.
Pre-K was part of the HOPE package last year that we had to make some adjustments on. We anticipate, if the recommendations we've submitted are approved, that we can add 10 days to the pre-K program, bring it back up to a 170-day school year for our pre-K students. That will give our pre-K teachers a raise as a result of that. And we think that's certainly what we can do and what we should do.
On Tuesday at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast, Governor Deal unveiled portions of his proposed budget, which includes a tax break on energy.
We are proposing the elimination of the sales tax on energy used in manufacturing, a move that will align us with many of our top competitors.
I do believe that comprehensive tax reform is the route to go. I don't make any secret that I generally favor a consumption tax as opposed to an income tax. I think that's better for our for making us economically competitive here in Georgia. I think that, and I do support the repeal of the sales tax on energy used in manufacturing.
We agree that exempting that sales tax on energy and manufacturing is the right thing to do. The question isn't should we do it, it's how do we pay for it. So we're looking forward to seeing the governor's proposal, understanding the numbers, and making certain that in order to help manufacturing, we don't put a heavier burden on families.
Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle also spoke at the breakfast. He says he favors a constitutional amendment that would require local school systems to give money to state-approved charter schools.
We have to have change. We have to embrace change. And charters is one of those agents for change. And I think we owe it to the citizens of our state to make sure that this method is available and accessible. The more options we have, the better we're going to be.
That evening, Governor Deal also delivered his second State of the State address. He spoke about two of the most important issues facing the state: education and jobs.
The amended and fiscal year 2013 budgets that I've prepared take advantage of the stabilization in revenues and appropriate an additional $146.6 million to fully fund enrollment growth in our K through 12 schools. Go Bill is a public-private initiative that will round out our workforce development program by educating young people and the public at large about the skilled trades.
An official Democratic response was presented by Senate Minority Leader Senator Steve Henson.
We will stand up for working families of our state who are struggling to pay their mortgage, buy health insurance, and put food on the table. Democrats believe our greatest asset is the people of Georgia.
More response to the governor's State of the State address was given on Wednesday, the third legislative day. Legislators on both sides of the aisle agree that this will be a tough budget year.
We're still at the level we were before the recession as far as revenues, so state government's still pretty lean. And, obviously in all sorts of areas there, for money for developmental disabilities and mental health, and all these areas that need more resources, but we're just going to be very measured about the way we approach that.
We're very excited about the direction the governor has set for the state of Georgia, his emphasis on education, on criminal justice reform, on creating jobs. The question now is, how are we going to pay for it? He listed an extraordinary, I think, direction in terms of investment, but we have to be certain that we aren't taking from one group to pay for these initiatives.
The budget is down about $3 billion from where it was before the recession. And it's $3 billion of real cuts, and we're don't seem to be in a position to put back any of that money, especially in education, both K through 12 and the border regions.
Several events were held under the Gold Dome on Thursday, including the 27th annual Martin Luther King Day celebration.
We're all enhanced by the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. We are all so much better, and our union, our city, our state, and our country is indeed more perfect.
Also on Legislative Day 4, Georgia Alliance for Ethics Reform and the Tea Party Patriots rallied for ethics reform. They say there should be a cap on lobbyist gifts.
Every state around us has come to the conclusion that there ought to be a limit on gifts by lobbyists to government officials. Some of those limits are zero. 72% of Georgians are for it.
And those are the highlights from this week under the Gold Dome.
Thanks, Kiosha. Wrapping up our leadership interview with House Speaker David Ralston this week, our Senator Parrish asked his thoughts about U.S. Justice approval of the redistricting maps passed during the special legislative session this fall.
I look at it as validating a process that we put together very carefully to ensure that we did something that had never been done before here in this state, which was to produce on the first try maps that were fair, that were legal, that were sensible, and that were constitutional. We worked very, very hard with that goal in mind and being transparent in the process. And I was very, very proud of that process. The leadership of the reapportionment effort in the House was very strong, very solid. So, yeah, I was kind of pleased when we got that word on December 23rd. It was really sort of a historic moment, I think, for the state. I know that there was complaining. The minority party, I think, has complained about the redistricting process since we had two parties in Georgia. I don't know how I don't know how you end that.
Any other bills that you're interested in? Anything else that we need to discuss?
I'm not interested in a whole lot of bills. You know, one of the things that I was most proud of last session was that we not try to pass a huge amount of bills every year. You know, I'm a Republican, and I think one of the things that my party has always believed in is less government. And I was a little disappointed that when we became the majority party, that we continued to pass even more bills than the other party had passed when they were in power. We reversed that last year in the 2011 session and passed I know they checked for me, and I think at least going 10 years back, it was the fewest number of bills the House had passed in 10 years. I know that may strike some people as an odd thing to be proud of, but I was kind of proud of that. We may try that again this year.
We're going to take a short break of Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. When we return, it's time for in-depth analysis of important legislative issues with Buddy Darden, a former state legislator and U.S. congressman, and political analyst Bill Crane. We're going to talk about everything from muscling through judicial reform to Georgia potentially becoming the big dog on Super Tuesday, so don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. The state capitol begins to buzz with activity every January as the General Assembly convenes for its annual 40-day session. A few moments ago, you saw highlights of this first week under the Gold Dome. Legislation passing, Governor Deal's annual State of the State message, and more. Joining us to help put all this in perspective is Buddy Darden, a former state legislator and congressman and who is senior counsel at McKenna, Long, and Aldridge. And Bill Crane, political analyst with CSI Crane. Guys, last April was a long time ago. It's great to have you back again. Happy New Year.
It's great to be back. I'm so glad to see the Georgia legislature back in session. And, you know, the great thing about the legislature, Bill, is the more it changes, the more it stays the same.
The
and
traditions
it's a
are always
great,
nice,
great
starting
tradition.
with the Wild Hog Supper, the State of the State, and actually seeing them do something the first week for a change is kind of nice.
Well, not a lot, but at least
just
they
enough
got
to
started.
move the
Yeah,
gavel.
but it was more of the ceremony this week. They actually
Right.
passed some final passage of some bills the first day, including the issue of hiring and firing teachers and local school board controls.
Right, but did you notice that the governor requested right here on GPTV to come down and do a Reagan-esque type State of the State, which came over this station at 7 o'clock, and they had the people to come in, and they recognized the First Lady up in the balcony, and they had people with her who
They had some of the prop people to
some of the
represent
prop
parts
people,
of the budget that they were going to talk about.
just like being back in Congress and seeing Ronald Reagan did it. But one thing they've got to remember, they're on camera now, and you see the warts as well, so they're going to have to quit smacking.
HDTV isn't kind to all of us at all times, including the wrinkles and all this stuff.
Well, you got to quit smacking gum and a few things like that.
Well, it was quite an effort, quite a feet, and quite a kudo for this network to be able to broadcast that in high definition for the first time.
It was well done.
Well, more what the governor had to say that night, laying out his agenda. It was the overall civ. Job creation?
Well, it said as job creation, and the money's going to education. The governor is putting his money where his mouth is. He said when he first came in, and he had a very tight cupboard that first year, that he was going to invest in early childhood intervention, and put some more money back into pre-K as soon as he could, and good to his word. They funded 10 days back, a 5% increase for those pre-K teachers who took a pay cut last year, and more is on the way. College education, the university system also got some money that they weren't expecting to get. And they're looking at refunding or reorganizing the QBE funding formula, but the net is more money back to the public schools.
I think the governor's instincts are to support public education. You know, his parents were public educated and down in Sandersville, Georgia, among other places, and his wife. And tell me, having served in elected office, your wife is the first and last person you talk to in the day, and she'll have a greater influence on him probably than anybody in the state capitol. I know that was a big influence on me, and I guarantee you Sandra Deal is whispering in his ear what needs to be done on public education. And she believes in public education.
As it should be. And the governor made a big point of low-hanging fruit in the way of skilled jobs that are going unfilled. Hundreds of jobs at Siemens. There's some 4,400 jobs, mostly in metro Atlanta, highly skilled jobs that aren't being filled because of the lack of technical skills of the workforce.
Hear that, folks at Georgia Tech and Southern Tech? Y'all need to get those boys out there and get them graduated.
Well, the technical schools, too. And he made technical schools a big priority.
And let me carry that one step further. Governor seems to talk a little bit too much emphasizing the tax structure that lures industry here. I don't think it's the tax structure. I think what lures people here is an educated and qualified workforce. It's nice to have a few tax breaks. Don't misunderstand. We all like to have a little extra money in our pocket, but most surveys,
it's part of the package.
yeah, most surveys show though
Traffic, density, quality of life, what you can buy, housing,
education,
weather.
housing. Exactly, and that's the one thing that we're missing here in this state, Scott.
A jobs-ready workforce, ready to rock.
Correct.
Well, is he making the proposals to help make that happen? I mean,
yeah, certainly putting money into technical education and more into higher ed to get more of those.
But there's also in tech now.
Well, but there's also situations that are federal. Is it the HB1 visa? Is that the one with the that there are jobs that have to be filled at a certain level of technical skill that aren't fresh out of college jobs. And those people aren't here, so we've got it on both ends. But yeah, they're certainly making.
The governor's off to a good start. I think there's a lot more needs to be done. The money's short, but the emphasis has got to be on education. That's got to be the first, second, and third priority, in my opinion.
He's also reaching across the aisle when he doesn't have to, with both houses being controlled by the Republicans starting last year, but certainly again this year, demonstrating that he wants to reach out across the party aisle. And Buddy and I were talking before we got in here this afternoon. We're impressed with what
our people, the Democrats, in such a minority that we've got to, if we're going to get anything, we've got to cooperate because they almost have supermajorities in both houses of the General Assembly.
That's true. And as you mentioned, the state of the state aura of this whole thing, very symbolically, he gave Minority Leader Stacey Abrams a hug. As he was going down the aisle, Governor Deal did. Now, you mentioned the energy sales tax that the governor is pushing.
That's a done deal.
Repeal. You think it is?
That manufacturers will no longer. Yes, I mean that.
But $100 to $140 million
has to be paid for somewhere.
Where's that come from?
You got to make it up, and
they're going to tax the internet.
Unlike the federal government, you just can't say, "Well, we're going to spend this item and not have an offset." You've got to come up with the money, and which is why I don't see any tax relief on individuals. And I know Speaker Rawson says he favors a consumer-based tax, and so that means you've got to have more excise taxes, more sales taxes.
Well, I think we're going to
money's got to come from somewhere.
E-tailers, internet transactions in a greater degree than they are now, or basically car rentals and hotels are the only tax revenues that are substantially coming in. Amazon.com pays sales tax in Georgia, but you're going to see a push in a law to broaden the sales tax collection of vendors that sell into Georgia.
Right, and you saw, I'm sure, about the governor's proposal, or at least he's got a trial balloon out there to have you pay tax on internet purchases, which I'm probably the only person in this room who thinks it's a good idea, but at least it puts everybody.
Do you buy anything on internet, Buddy?
Yes, I do.
It levels the playing field.
Quite a bit, but levels the playing field, and I don't think, now Mitch Daniel, the governor of Indiana, has negotiated with Amazon.com and has worked out something, and I think that the various governors can do it. There might be some concessions, but certainly it's just not fair.
AJC political insider Jim Galloway actually has popped this in his column. The headline is, Nathan Deal considers extending sales tax enforcement to internet purchases. Sometimes you're charged sales tax when you buy something online. Sometimes you aren't. And so the key is enforcement. How much money are we talking about?
And if you have a physical presence here in Georgia, then you pay. Right. But if you don't, and you don't sell, basically you're coming from offshore, you're coming out, you don't pay now. And then, obviously they can, particularly with the bigger players, Target, Walmart, they can twist some screws a little bit and they'll be paying.
So if Amazon had a distribution facility, for instance, in Georgia,
then they'd pay.
They could. You have any feel at all how much money we're not collecting because that's not being enforced?
There's no way to tell right now. I think we probably need to do some kind of study, but it's almost impossible to tell because, but I, for one, think that a lot of revenue is getting by. A lot of revenue is being foregone here that we could have.
During Black Friday after Thanksgiving and Monday, whatever they call it, Cyber Monday, this was the first year retail sales were bigger on Cyber Monday than in retail Black Friday. And so that tells you that the economy, the tip is starting to occur.
One more thing, Governor Deal is hinting, though not being very specific at all, that he's about to make an announcement of a major plant, a major manufacturing facility coming to Georgia that will rival the Kia plant with their some 3,000 jobs. Have you heard anything at all about that? The governor's office isn't going beyond that.
Only that he told the Georgia Press Association that this week when he spoke to them, and I don't even know where the site would be, but I would assume it's in the either pharmaceutical or technological areas because that's where he's been pitching. I don't think we're going to get another automaker.
Right. Oh, you don't get another automaker, in my opinion.
I don't even know one that's hunting.
But that shows you, I just don't know.
Okay.
And they've done a great job. The economic development people are keeping the wraps on this one.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is talk about it before it's done.
You got it.
Is what I hear. One more thing here about education, charter schools. Pushing forward with that, your thoughts? Is that going to? Are we going to see more charter schools? Will we see entire school systems going?
We will see more charter schools, but I'm not sure we're going to see more state-run charter schools because of the court battle that the state lost last year. Most counties do embrace charter schools, but they want to decide who gets the charters, and they want to decide. They don't want necessarily the state deciding the appropriations coming to the county, going to this charter school, that charter school. They want to control that, like the higher firepower that was given this week to the superintendents.
Well, as you know, it probably will pass a constitutional amendment through the House and the Senate and submit it to the voters this year. Whether or not the amendment will pass the voters is another question to be seen, because some people think that charter schools are the answer to everything, but it's only one useful tool, I think, that can be used to improve education. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that the amendment will necessarily pass. It will have to be sold. It will have to be sold.
What do you make of the Tea Party holding or trying to hold the governor's feet to the fire over supporting the T-SPLOST initiative that Georgia is going to vote on this summer?
I know there's extreme discussion in the business community to move it to the general election when there's a broader range of voters, and the belief, right or wrong, that more Democratic voters would be more inclined to support particularly the mass transit aspects of the T-SPLOST. But I don't think the Tea Party is going to let the governor off the hook on this.
I don't think the governor is going to be able to move it. I noticed one other thing too. Speaking of the Tea Party, they've been after him on the ethics bill, and it seems like there's one going to pass. And if they don't they don't pass anything else, I hope they change the name of the Georgia Government Transparency and
Government
Campaign
Disclosure and Transparency Commission.
All of you guys know the title,
to the ethics. If they at least changed it back, that would be one improvement anyway.
And the governor did tell a radio interview that, oh, by the way, if your district doesn't support the T-SPLOST vote, you might wind up in the back of the line when you come to the capital of transportation project. So he does have at least a bully pulpit on this, and he does support it. So we'll see.
I honestly think it's most in trouble in Metro Atlanta, and it's those hot lanes that are going to ding the credibility.
It's in trouble in Cobb. It's in trouble in Gwinnett.
But South Georgia and the other districts, they want it, and they don't have 7 and 8% sales tax now because they don't have the MARTA tax. They don't have.
We're just getting started. We're going to get you both back on a regular basis. Is that okay?
I'll be back. I want to say real quickly, it's been a bad week for Bambi, because now they're going to start letting people hunt deer with silence.
Oh,
did you see that?
We're going to get that another time. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you being here. Primetime Lawmakers will not be seen next week because the General Assembly will not officially be in session. However, the Joint House-Senate Appropriations Committee will be holding hearings for the state budget. Those hearings will be available online as they're happening at our website, gpb.org/lawmakers. If you missed any part of this broadcast, catch Primetime Lawmakers when it repeats at 5:30 Monday morning. Now, coming up next to GPB, Rick Steves Europe. Tonight, Rick travels to Granada, Cordoba, and Spain's Costa del Sol. Rick Steves is coming up right here on GPB. And that's our broadcast for this 5th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Primetime Lawmakers will return Monday, January 23rd at 7 p.m. We hope you have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.